Welcome to Evolving Ideas. I'm Elaine Smitha. We have a fabulous guest for you on this show, Robert Ott, and he is going to be sharing his remarkable story with us that will be very inspirational to you. It's going to be something you're going to keep in your heart forever when we come back. Smitha, and we have with us Robert Ott, who is the president and CEO of Certain Victory Food Services, Inc., and I'm very proud and privileged to present him to you as a guest on my show tonight because he has a very remarkable story that will be inspiring you in all avenues of your life. And I'm not going to give it away yet, but we'll get right into it. So please join me in welcoming Robert Ott. Thank you, Robert, so much for coming.
Pleasure to be here,
Elaine.
It's
wonderful to have you here. It's really wonderful. Your name came to me through a mutual friend, which is oftentimes the way we get guests on our show here. But I had not known that you were in Olympia, and I'm so pleased to know that you are. And you are a martial artist, and that's kind of where your story begins, I think, back in New Jersey.
Southern New Jersey.
Southern New Jersey.
Yes. In 1989, I opened up my own martial arts school, the Traditional Martial Arts Institute, Incorporated. And it was a very successful school located on the White Horse Pike in Southern New Jersey. It happened to be the only Hapkido school in all the Delaware Valley area. And that was one of my big goals that I achieved at that point in time in my life.
Mm-hmm. So you were feeling pretty full of yourself at that time, huh?
In many ways, yes. In many ways. In so many ways, it was like I achieved a certain goal that I was striving for, and it felt good inside. It really did.
Now, martial arts, it has many different aspects to it. It's like a fan. It has different aspects to it. Like I take Tai Chi, which is a very slow, meditational kind of activity, although it can be used for defense if needed. But and then there's all kinds of other strains of these martial arts. So why don't you share what those are?
Well, I've been studying Korean martial arts now for about 26 years, and in the beginning of my studies, it was based off of the sports aspect of it, kicking, punching, competing, etc. But as time passed, I was at a point in my training where I wanted to get much deeper and learn more and get the whole picture, so to speak. And that's when I started getting into some of the more ancient Korean martial arts, Hapkido, Kuksowan, Hallangdo. And during that training, our four main principles that we studied was Shingang, the way of the mind, Weigang, the way of the body, Negang, the way of the ki, and Mugigang, extensions of the body. This was our main focus point in our studies, and via that became the martial art that I instructed.
So did you have an Oriental instructor yourself?
Yes, I've trained under some of the best Korean grandmasters, and I could mention several names, but yes, prior to opening my own school, I was the office manager and chief instructor for Grandmaster Go Chae-Tyuk. His headquarters was out of Exton, Pennsylvania, and truthfully one of the largest schools on the East Coast and one of the best grandmaster instructors.
Interesting. And you have had a lot of championships that you've won.
Sure. Before I opened up my own school, I was obviously blossoming and learning and competing, and competing in tournaments did more than just the concept of winning. It was something that enabled you to build your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and to demonstrate to yourself what you have learned, and what you've been studying. I won the Fight for Cancer Championships, gold medalist, the AAU 2 years in a row, other local areas, and it was very fulfilling. But it got to a point once again where, you know, the tournaments and the championships are one level. It certainly got to the point where it was time for me to move on to the next level.
Which was having your own place?
My own place, becoming an instructor and teaching from the heart. And I believe that in the reality behind it, I'm actually a student. But I believe a true student is a true teacher is a true student. And every day when I teach, I learn. And you get to that point in your years of training where it comes time to move to another level. And your learning comes from teaching and sharing. And that's how you begin to continue to grow.
Well, they always say that teacher, you know, they get the greatest benefit because they're the ones who are learning still.
Absolutely, you know? Absolutely.
Yeah, you teach what you want to learn.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's really great. So, in southern New Jersey, your father had a bar. Is that the way the story goes?
Well, there's a lot of different versions to the story.
Well, why don't you give us a real one?
I'll give you a good one here. I was a young man, and in many ways, just like any other young man, learning about life and finding directions and looking to tomorrow and the future. And my father at the time was a general manager for a bar, and not being an individual who hung in bars or any of that stuff on a consistent basis, but being somebody who was very social, got along with a lot of people and shook a lot of hands and had a lot of friends and enjoyed life. I found myself, you know, occasionally going to visit there and meeting the people and all of that. And so that was kind of how all that got started. And needless to say, on one of those occasions, my whole entire life went through an extreme change. So
how did that get instigated? What was the initial thrust on that?
Well, one evening I had arrived, and you know, it was a normal evening, and things were good. I was only there for about 10 minutes, and a large group of people came into the bar who probably should not have been let into the bar. They were intoxicated already, and I don't know, you could just see that they had a certain attitude. And after they were let in, about 5-10 minutes later, one of the individuals had approached me and was trying to start up a conversation with an individual I was talking with and kind of causing some trouble and this and that. And I basically, and the individual I was talking with, got up and walked to the back. I put on my coat and started walking to the back myself because I didn't want to be involved in the situation. Can I defend myself? Absolutely. My concern wasn't that. My concern was the fact that this individual was intoxicated. And when you're dealing with people who are intoxicated, and when you're dealing with people who you can tell, you can feel, you can see that they don't have a concern over life, they're irrational. Those people can be 1 inch tall. But when you're dealing with someone who doesn't care about life, they're one of the most dangerous people you can ever deal with. And I saw that in this individual. I wanted no parts of it. So I had picked up my jacket, turned, walked the other way, and at that point in time, I was pushed from behind. So nevertheless, you know, I turned around to defend myself. And as I turned around, the individual who pushed me was being escorted out the door, and I, of course, was also being escorted out the door. And
by your father?
Yes, by my father. So it was, you know, it was
you
that
didn't
type of
want any
thing.
fights there in the bar.
Sure. So we ended up out in the foyer, and needless to say, that period of time is one of the most difficult parts to ever remember. The closer and closer you get, it's so much more difficult to remember the actual point. But I remember dropping to the ground. I remember standing back up. I remember tucking my shirt in, and the other individual who I was defending myself against had already left the scene. It was over and done with. And I remember tucking my shirt in, and that is pretty much the last part that I remember. And it was after that, during that couple seconds, my whole entire life changed. He went out to his vehicle and pulled a gun out of his van, came back to the door, cracked open the door, and put the gun to my head and pulled the trigger. And that's when my whole entire life changed.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable in the first place that anybody could be so angry that they would resort to that in the first place, much less really act upon it. That's the shocking part of that.
I totally agree with you. I think one of the things that I still to this day, and that was in 1990, I look back now 15 years ago, and I still say to myself, it's so hard for me to comprehend how that was your answer to an issue.
Yes.
By killing somebody.
Yes.
This individual didn't try to make me disabled. This individual tried to kill me.
Right.
And it's hard to comprehend that method of thinking.
Yeah, that level of anger.
Yes, yes.
And as a last resort, I mean, to have that level of intense anger.
Sure.
That they saw the only way out was to be even.
And it was an issue that I actually was trying to avoid.
Yes.
And I think that was presented and stated during this confrontation that I didn't want to be in this situation.
Right, right, right.
Did I defend myself? Oh, yes, I did. Absolutely. For my life. But I certainly did not want any part of it.
No.
So that was when my whole entire life changed, October 6, 1990.
Was your father there to see this?
Yes. Yes, he was there to see this, to watch his son fall to the ground.
Oh, my. That had to be a terrible shock for him.
I would tend to think so, yes. It certainly affected him, and I'm sure to this day it still does affect him.
I'm sure it does.
Yes. So that was when an individual is, or should I say, becomes or has become a victim. In most cases, they were a normal person in life. In some cases, they were a good person in life. It not only affects that individual who's the victim, but we have to realize how many other people are affected by this when this happens. Mm-hmm. When my situation happened, many people were hurt by what had happened to me. It affected many people.
Of course.
So, nevertheless, the immediate concerns weren't in that part of it, because the immediate concerns were more, the immediate concerns were not psychologically dealing with the fact that I'm disabled. The immediate concerns were, am I going to live and survive through this?
Yes.
You know, the bullet had went through the left part of my skull. It went through the left temporal lobe of my brain, cut the nerves in my left eye, and blew up in my right eye.
Unbelievable.
To be able to sit here and have a conversation with you, and to be able to look back at how far I've come since then and what life's been about, is sometimes I don't really have words for it. It's something else. It is certainly something else.
Well, Robert, how long did it take for you to, I don't know, recover? I don't know, at least from the initial surgery. I mean, they had to do repair work, I'm sure. My goodness.
Sure. Well, there was a lot of different steps.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I think it's important to share with you that I sat in the trauma center, in Cooper Trauma Center, for 18 hours. And the doctors pretty much said there's nothing we can do. And they put their hands up and walked away. A nurse came in on a new shift who worked in the trauma unit. And the nurse was there by my side, looking through my chart, everything. At that point in time, my head was very, very large, bandages all over. You really didn't know who I was at that point in time. And I apparently had grabbed her hand. And she said, we have got to do something to help this young man. She went to the neurosurgeons, and she said that this man has just reacted a certain way. There's something we need to do to help this individual. They said, no, it's just his nerve reactions. There's still nothing we can do.
Don't you enjoy the way they just write it off?
Well,
I mean,
basically, the nurse then took it upon herself
Yes.
to pretty much take it on her own initiative.
Yes.
She got on the phone and she called Dr. Cervante.
Now, you see, right off, Robert, someone like an angel was sort of there in the form of the nurse who had the vision, internal vision, to be able to recognize that you were not lost, where the other ones had sort of given up on you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And as we proceed on with this story here today that I'm sharing with you, I will kind of go back to that, to how I see this whole big picture,
Yes.
what I've taken this to be.
Yes.
The nurse called Dr. Louis Cervante, who is a very well-known neurosurgeon who deals with cases that a lot of other doctors don't want to put their hands in. He's not concerned about the liability issue, and he has worked on cases where a lot of other doctors would not want to put their hands in there. And Dr. Louis Cervante came in, and with no guarantees, he went to work on me. The first surgery was cleaning me up. A month later, I ended up with meningitis, and at that point in time, they opened up the lower left part of my stomach, took a piece of tissue out, opened up my skull from left to right, and patched the tissue to my brain. All during this time, I still did not realize that I'm blind. Because you're on so much medicine.
Yes.
Your head is so swollen, your brain.
Yes.
You don't, you're seeing things, trust me. You're seeing things you can't even explain what you're seeing, but you don't realize you're blind. You don't even know what you're realizing. And so during that time, I was going through those experiences. This was in early October when it happened. So it was somewhat right before Christmas when I started getting somewhat my wits together to figure out where I'm at. One of the first things, one of the female doctors was insisting that I go to the rehabilitation center next door and spend 6 months there going through rehabilitation. And as sick as I was, I said, no, I need to go home in my bed with my family. And I remember fighting back and forth with this. And it really boiled down to they were going to get $1,000 a day from me being in the rehabilitation center.
One of those situations.
Yes, and when the fact of the matter is what I needed was love in my family.
Yes,
I didn't need to be put in my own little living room place to try to figure life out. I needed the love and warmth to build my self-esteem and my confidence.
Exactly.
I needed that back more than anything.
Exactly.
And so I basically did not do that, and it was one of the best decisions with what wits I did have to not do that.
Yes.
And my mother is another angel. She was by my side the whole time through all of this. And
you were her baby.
That's right. That's right. And my mother's a beautiful woman. She had actually had gotten married several months prior to when this happened to me. And
to the man who was with the bar, or to another man?
No.
Another man.
My mother and original father were divorced when I was going on 2 years old. And so I grew up with my mother, a single mother, and we were very close. And before my injury happened, I had given my mother away at the wedding.
Oh, how sweet. Were you the only child?
Yes, at the time.
Oh.
And at the time when I was walking her down to get married, her belly was getting ready to have number 2.
I see.
So I have a little brother named Ricky, and my stepfather is Richard. And my mother's name is Ann. And sure enough, my mom gets married, and sure enough, this happens to her boy. And I look back now on how much I respect her husband and his family and all that they went through during the time
Yes.
that my family had gone through such a horrifying thing.
Yes.
Strengths were challenged, and people needed to be together with love of all times. And they were there. And so that is something that I will never forget, and so much appreciative of their love during that tough time.
Well, they were just sending you, caring for you, Robert.
Yes.
I think when we get to that place where we recognize that our family is really looking out for one of their own and totally focused on that person's healing, it gets almost humbling to realize the amount of love and compassion and caring and attention and belief in your recovery. All of that just is so impactful, and it makes a difference in your attitude about your wanting to recover too.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I laid there in that hospital, the first 2 days, there was probably over 200 people that came to visit. They were very sorry to see Robert go.
Oh.
And
oh, lack of faith.
well, I don't know if it was so much faith, but it was just the trauma that happened.
Yes.
It did not look good.
Yes.
And that was nice for them to come, but I decided to stick around. And I want to even go a step further and give appreciation to the people who stood by my side after.
Yes, absolutely.
After I moved on and turned the page. And it was a very big change for many people. I used to, in many ways, be the leader. I'd be the person behind the wheel driving the car. I was the one with the plan. I had the blueprints. And now, all of a sudden, I need someone's hand. I need someone to help me out. And I need someone with strength to help me get through this.
Yes, it's very humbling, isn't it?
Yes, it very much was. And it tested many, many people in many ways. I know from my heart who spent the quality amount of time in that hospital room with me. I know the people, and it's a few. And I never, ever will forget them for what they've done and what they've been through to experience that and how they've been there by my side. They're very special people, and they know who they are. And that I won't ever forget, and that means so much to me. It really does.
Absolutely. Well, you certainly are an inspiration just in the will part of that, you know, and that nurse, oh my goodness, she just had to have wings on her.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about that nurse. After I recovered, so to speak, I was home several months after the holidays. In fact, if my memory serves me right, it was around Valentine's Day. I showed up at the hospital with my mother and a little jewelry box with a necklace and a little heart. And I found the nurse. I hunted her down. And I introduced myself. I said, you are the individual who saved my life. And I just want to thank you so much for all that you've done and what you're about. And my heart is always there for you, and I hope you are given the good spirit and love the rest of your life for what you've done and what you're about as a person. And she's a beautiful woman, and I don't know where she's at today and what her life's about, but she will never be forgotten. Very special person.
So you gave her the necklace?
Yes, I gave her the necklace and my hug and love and let her know that I'm going to move on, and thank you so much for all that you've done.
Absolutely. Did those other doctors who didn't believe that you could be saved, did they ever come around to talk to you?
Well, certainly. A couple of them did. A couple of them did. And it really didn't matter if they did or did not. What mattered is, you know, the steps I needed to make to move forward. It was very interesting. It wasn't until after Christmas sometime where I actually had my first appointment with what's called a neuro-ophthalmologist at Wills Eye Hospital, which is one of the top hospitals for the eyes in the world.
And where is that located?
That's located in Philadelphia. And Wills Eye Hospital set up an appointment with Dr. Servino. Don't confuse Cervantes and Servino, two different individuals. And Dr. Servino was a neuro-ophthalmologist. And during that time, this had happened to me 15 years ago, that was somewhat of a new title, a new name.
New research area.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember my first appointment there. I had so many hopes, and I believed so hard and strong inside. I believed that through this appointment, through the steps you need to do, I'll be able to see again. And I'll never forget one of the most challenging things that I faced during all this experience was towards the end of the session with the doctor. It went on for about 3 hours. At the very end, he and two other doctors stood around me and said, Robert, we unfortunately don't have any answer to your situation. We don't have the technology to be able to help you be able to see again. We don't have the technology to be able to work with the nerves. And that was different, but almost the same as the gunshot itself.
Yes.
It was different because I didn't become unconscious afterwards. I stayed there to take this in and realize within those seconds as he's saying the sentence that I am now looking at the rest of my life being blind, possibly. And that is very similar, and I can only speak for myself, in taking the wings away from a bird.
Yes.
And so that was another step that I had to work with. And that's when we began to get into the next level, and that is the psychological challenges you deal with at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And that was a whole mission in itself.
Yes.
And that took several years, and many stories within that. So the individual who shot me escaped the scene that night. And that following summer, an article came out in the paper, of course we were not even notified, that he was arrested and he was caught. And 1 year from the time he was caught, he was then sentenced. The individual was actually the same age as me who did this to me. His name was also Robert, and he was sentenced to second-degree aggravated assault, maximum 10 years, eligible for parole in 3.5 years, and they were allowed to include the year he sat there before he was sentenced. So that, I got a phone call one day letting me know that they would like it if I came to his sentencing. And I said, he's being sentenced? Well, what is he being sentenced for? What has this individual done? What is he being sentenced for? And that's when they shared with me second-degree aggravated assault. And I realized at that point in time that this individual who took away my eyesight and changed my life forever will someday be walking again out of jail. And the anger, the frustration, put me in many different directions, my thoughts. But one of the things I had to get a grip on at that point in time was belief. And that is something I learned in martial arts for many, many years. And that's called the constant cohesion of all things in the universe. And I believe what you put out in life, you get back in return. And I believe this individual, his fate is in his own hands, and his destiny will be determined. And I had to depend on that to find my own contentness in being able to turn the page and move on in life.
Did you go to the trial?
Yes, I certainly did.
Did they ask you to speak?
Yes, I did. And yes, they did, and they asked me to speak. Mm-hmm. And I stood up and I said to the judge, very much what I just shared with you.
Yes.
I said, Your Honor, I said, no matter what I say right now, this individual will be someday walking again and moving on. But I can no longer see. I can no longer see my family. I can no longer see my friends. I can no longer see myself in the mirror. My whole freedom and independence of who I was as a person has been taken away. For reasons that are unacceptable, for reasons that should have never happened. And I believe inside that his fate will come to him in what he has done. And I'm sure there was some other things I said, but you're in a phase when you're talking during that time. You're in a phase.
Yes.
So that was another step in my life to move in that direction.
So was he sentenced to what you had said earlier? That
yes, he was sentenced to second-degree aggravated assault, eligible for parole in 3.5 years, maximum 10 years. There's more to that story, but I figured I would continue on in the journey a little bit, and then we could get back to his fate.
Okay.
But
and if we don't have enough, for, if we finish with doing other things, well, you'll have to come back and do it again.
Sure, you betcha.
Okay.
You betcha.
All right, so continue.
Well, I found myself lost in many ways. I had to sit down and talk things out and find myself and my soul. The loneliness was so powerful. I realized I need to shut down my martial arts school and I need to learn how to be blind. And that is what I did. And it took time, it took effort, it took dealing with yourself and your own frustrations and anger. Patience.
Yes.
Patience,
Yes.
patience. Learning how to use a cane. Learning how to read your mail and ask for assistance when needed. Very difficult.
Yeah, for somebody like you who's very much in control of yourself, having to ask for help can be quite humbling.
Very difficult. And being able to, or should I say not being able to do things you used to do so well and what you're about.
Yes.
I began to cry. Absolutely. Many tears, many different times. And it was quite a journey. I met a man during this journey in my time who said, Robert, it'd be wonderful if you came to this high school and shared with the students what you've been through. And kind of told your story. And I didn't think much about it. I said, fine, I'll tell my story. And I realized how I responded to him was me expressing, I need to tell my story because I have so much built up inside of me. And sure enough, I spent the day at a high school through 8 different classes, half hour each class, sharing my story of what I've been through. And by the end of that day, it was some of the best medicine that I had actually been able to obtain since this terrible thing happened to me. And while I felt so healed inside, I had students approaching me afterwards, thanking me for the time in sharing my story and giving them the strength to turn the page in their challenges they face in life every day.
Yes.
So something began, a spark began there. And then it wasn't long after that when I put my martial arts uniform back on and I held my first seminar. I held it adjacent to Villanova University outside of Philadelphia, the Radnor Hotel, and we had a fabulous turnout. And I realized I am still a teacher. I am still who I am and what I am.
Yes.
And I still teach from the heart. And from there, life moved on in many different ways.
So now I understand that your martial art instructor came to see you.
Well, during the time after I was released from the hospital, I was home, I was weak, and I was very scared. I was embarrassed.
Of course.
I didn't want people to see me. I didn't know what I looked like.
Yes, of course.
And one day there was a knock on my door. And my mother said, you have a guest here who wants to see you. It's your very first martial arts instructor. And I was so taken back by this.
Yes.
I couldn't believe he was there to see me.
Yeah, touched.
And he hadn't seen me in many years.
Yes. Well, you obviously made an impression on him to begin with.
I guess I did.
Yes. Otherwise, he might have forgotten you, Robert.
He sat down at that table with me, and he shared his spirit, and I thanked him so much for that. And he said to me, he says, Robert, you got to put that uniform on, and you got to go back to your school, and you got to move on with life. And I said, I don't know how I can do this. I am so weak. My strength, my spirit, I am blind. I don't know, I'm embarrassed. I don't know if I can do this. He says, you can do this because that is who you are and what you are about. And I remember he left, and that evening I sat there in bed, and my mother came in and sat down next to me. And she said, Bobby, you've got to put that uniform back on. I said, Mother, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can face people again. And she took a deep breath, and she said something that was in many ways a splash of fresh water, crisp, new, clean air, a whole new awakening. She said to me, she said, Robert, the more you keep giving up and staying in this bed and in this house and not moving forward in life, then the more the man who shot you keeps winning. And after she said that, it went in deep. And I can say from then on, I was able to turn the page and move forward in life. I was able to continue to grow, share my story, speak to people, continue doing seminars, and learn how to be blind. And I began to realize the more of an issue I make out of my blindness, the more of a problem I make out of the blindness, there's only one person I can point the finger at, and that is me.
Yes.
That individual did what he did to me that night, but that is all. I will give that individual no more credit for doing any more negative things to me in stopping my freedom and independence of life.
I love it.
And that is the big step I made at that point in time.
Well, I think it's very important that you had 3 people in your life who made remarkable statements to you that actually turned you around. You had the nurse in the hospital, you had your mother, and you had your martial art instructor.
Yes.
Who all said certain things to you that gave you that hope. Without hope, we don't have anything.
That's right. That's right.
But they saw in you the will because they knew you were a powerful individual inside, that you had the will. If you could just get tapped into that, you could do it. And they believed in you. They believed, 3 people believed in you, Robert.
Well, to this day, I look back and I've learned one thing for sure through this traumatic thing that I went through. There's no question in the past, and even as a person now, people will tell you I'm a very loving person. My arms are open. I'm a very giving person.
Yes.
But one of the things I learned through going through this traumatic, horrifying thing in my life is it is so important to learn how to love yourself and who you are and your own self-soul.
Absolutely.
It is so important.
You have to start. Once you have that somebody believes in you, I think having someone believe in you is really critical, because sometimes we feel so alone. And if one person comes up, and they say, I believe in you. I know you can do this.
Yes.
And that gives you begin to introspect. Then you say, well, I could do that. I mean, I've had that myself. I could do that. Yes, if, and eventually then you get to that place where you're almost well up with this energy that says, I can do this. By Jove, I can. And I'm not going to let that person own my life.
Yes.
And that's what you've done.
Well, I take a lot of pride in it, and it's been a hell of a journey, and I have a feeling that it's just getting warmed up.
Yes.
There's a lot more coming my way. I've got some. Since that period of time, a lot has happened, and I've taken a lot of my frustrations and angers and things that I've had inside, and I've turned it around into a positive thing.
Exactly.
With a lot of spirit and energy and
Exactly.
drive and lust and passion. And it's been 15 years, and a lot has been accomplished since then. A lot has been accomplished since then.
Well, you have made remarkable progress, and we do have a clip I want to show. Well, we still have time on the show of what you're capable of doing, which I think is outstanding. And
is that the one where I go out and get the newspaper for my wife?
No, no, I don't have that. No, I don't have that clip on this. We just have a
that was one of the more challenging ones, I thought.
Yeah, well, that was in a whole nother set there, but we can do another show. We can pull that up then. But I think what you're doing right now, having started the food service, you had the restaurant, and just briefly, I'm not sure how much time we have here, but I would like for you to just say you went into the restaurant business.
Sure. Basically, while I was trying to figure my life out, I had come across a program called the Business Enterprise Program. It was based off the Randolph-Shepard Act that was established back in the 1930s.
Is this a government project?
Yes, it is. I graduated the program in the state of New Jersey, and with the will and want to move forward in life, I packed my gym bags, gave my mother a big kiss goodbye, $500, and flew out to the Northwest. And there I opened up my first business called the Modern Day Cafe. I did the full food services for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration for 10 years.
Well, now, was that an existing facility?
It was an existing facility that was in between owner-operators / licensed blind vendors. And they were looking for a good, qualified, licensed blind vendor, one that can work with people, one that can produce, one that can make the changes it needed. And, well, they found him. I had that passion. I wanted to move forward, and that's what I did. Martial arts and owning a restaurant have nothing in common, and yet they've got a lot in common. One of the most important things they have in common is your ability to work with people. And needless to say, that was my strength.
Yeah, you know, you don't even have to be blind just to have that quality, you know what I mean?
That's right, yeah. And in the 10 years of running that, we accomplished so much. We did fabulous food service for that business. And during the time there, I had taught over 40 individuals who were blind and lost their eyesight through many, many different injuries similar to mine and different than mine. But I became one of the main instructors here for Washington State in teaching basically on-the-job training and how to deal with things. Many of the clients that counselors from the state agency would send to me were clients who went through a traumatic change in life, because I think they felt that Robert went through his traumatic change, and in many ways maybe he can relate and be there by their side. Mm-hmm. And the more I help those individuals, the more I continued to be stronger and stronger inside.
Yes, it's very empowering, isn't it?
Very much so, absolutely.
One wouldn't, you know, they might look at what's empowering, how can you be empowering? But I think that when people work with you and they understand where you are and where you're coming from, and you see them as a part of yourself, and they see how effective you are with what you do and how you've overcome so much, it is very empowering. Well, and they want to be with somebody who is that way because it empowers them to be greater than they might have expected of themselves.
During that time, I met a beautiful woman, and we fell in love, and that woman is my wife, Kimberly. And since then, we've had a beautiful daughter. Her name is Savannah Alexis Ott, and she's quite a little firecracker. And
just like her father.
Absolutely. And it's been interesting. In 2002, I ended up doing some research on an up-and-coming contract that was going to be happening, and that was the full food service for Fort Lewis. And it was rather new in the program for the blind. There were some challenges. The arms weren't open for us to come in. There was doubts that we'd be able to perform and do well as a blind vendor in such a large contract. And I fought it for 2 years. Finally, the doors were let open for us. And I now do the full food services for Fort Lewis. And our employees can range anywhere from 400 to over 700 people.
Oh, my goodness, Robert.
We run over 20 dining facilities during the high peak season. ROTC training from all over the country is done here in the summer. And we feed those soldiers. We take a lot of pride in what we do. I decided to name my business very much that after my website and after some of the philosophies I've learned in life through martial arts. I've named my business Certain Victory. Certain Victories through strength, courage, and indomitable spirit. And Certain Victory Full Food Services Incorporated is the name of the business that I am president CEO of. And I take a lot of pride in that business. And I'm thankful every day. We feed those soldiers well. We take care of our employees. And we hire many people who are disabled. Close to 40% of my employees have a disability to one degree or another. And it's something to feel very good about inside.
Yes.
Something to feel very good about inside.
That's wonderful, Robert. Well, I want to show this footage so that our audience has a feel for the kind of thing that you do. So if they have that clip cued, perhaps we can roll that. So they'll let me know. It takes them a moment sometimes.
Sure.
To make that transition. But, yeah, I think that, here we go. Well, here's we're going to go. Oh, are we okay? Is it rolling? Well, we'll go on.
You should see me with your remote control. It's even worse.
Really? Well, I guess we have to wait for that clip to come up. Well, I think this is fascinating that you have so many people up there. Now, one of the things I was amazed to see in your pictures is you're working the cash register.
Yes.
How do you do that?
You do it with a smile on your face.
Aiming
Here we go.
straight for a spot just inches above your head. Now imagine the person wielding the blade is utterly, absolutely, totally blind.
So what, I'm blind. Big deal, what's the difference?
The difference is Robert Ott will do things most of us wouldn't dream of, like smashing through concrete with his hand, using his forearm as a human sledgehammer, taking on unseen opponents in hand-to-hand combat.
Tell you what, if you can see, you wouldn't want to look at what you're doing. It's too scary.
But nothing could be
That's
as scary.
great.
Well, it's important to put some humor in what you do.
Yes.
You know, we're only going to live life once, and
Well, at least this life anyway.
that's the truth.
In the physical.
Yeah, Robert Ott's going to do it one time, and I want to make the best out of it every step.
Well, I think this, you know, breaking concrete, that's, there's an art to that.
Yes, there is, because when you first try to learn how to break concrete, you obviously find out that you don't know the art as your hand becomes an accordion. So it definitely takes a lot of time and a lot of focus.
Yes.
And my original Grandmaster instructor would always say to me, 정신 당일, one mind, single purpose. Follow through, let your key energy go through. Always flow through. And that is something I do in life. I flow through.
It's having the will, having that focus. Total focus is what, it's like a laser. And when you have that focus, I've had that myself, and I know it's such an empowering moment when you just know. You just know that you can do this. There's not an element of doubt at all. There's no ambivalence. There's something that transforms the body when you have that mind there. The body is following the mind, and that focus is amazing because you feel so empowered.
Well, when you have a drive, a lust, when you feel it inside.
Yes.
One of my favorite people I met during my blindness was a gentleman in a wheelchair. His name is Mike Kennedy. And one of his little sayings was, turn your dreams into a goal with a deadline. And his little statement was so powerful and helpful for me. And I realized in my life that I already have that inside, and I need to utilize that and give that. I am blind. But that does not stop me from visual things. It doesn't stop me from going sightseeing. It doesn't stop me from watching TV. It doesn't stop me from looking you eye to eye and seeing you. I still see you. I still look in the mirror every day. I'll be honest with you. I watch a scary movie. Sometimes I got to close my eyes. But it's because it's here, and that cannot be taken away.
No.
I remember many years ago, I always, you know, it was so important to give all the time to someone else,
Yes.
to others.
Yes.
And I still feel that way now inside. And it didn't matter if it was this big or it was huge, big, heavy rock out of the mountains that I brought back. It didn't matter. It was from my heart. I now look now and I realize that isn't going to change. My heart will always be there. But you need to give to yourself and who you are.
Exactly.
And that is so important inside.
Yes.
And my blindness, in many ways, has brought me sight. The old saying is, seeing is believing. Well, it does be true in some ways. But I think it's important we understand that believing is also seeing. And I've learned to believe in who I am and what my goals, my journeys, and what my destiny is about. I just started, well, I've been working on it for a while, and it's due to be completed by December, my autobiography.
Oh, excellent.
And I have a gentleman who I am working with this. In fact, I'm going to be meeting him this June back in New Jersey, driving all over the place to show him where I lived. This is where I'm from. This is the hospital I was in. I want him to feel me, see me. I'm going to be teaching a seminar. I want him to see how it, so when we write this together, he can put that into the words. And I want to write this book, and I want to share what it's like to be an innocent victim of violent crime, to be disabled, to deal with the issues and the battles with Social Security disability income, to deal with the challenges of state agencies, to deal with ignorance, to deal with yourself your own self-soul, and being able to look in the mirror and still smile. The opportunities and the ability to move forward. I come from a single mother. We didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And now I have a corporation that has many, many, many employees and is very successful in its performance. You only live once, and if you live it right, once is surely enough.
Mm-hmm.
And this
true.
horrifying thing that's happened to me has taught me that.
Right.
In so many ways.
Okay, I want to go back to my question about the cashier. How can you handle money at the cash register?
I can tell you're really amazed by that.
I
should have
am.
brought that cash
I
register
looked
in here.
I thought, oh my God! I mean, there must be some way that it reads the bills or something or other.
First of all,
amazing.
two things. Okay, number one, how you present yourself as a cashier,
yes,
and how you are with the people,
yes,
is just as important as the people that you're interacting with.
Right.
The people I was interacting with were all professionals.
Right.
I was a person who had my confidence in me. And when they hand me a bill and I say this is a 10 or this is a 20 or they tell me what this is, I say it, we agree, it is clarified. And that is it, cut and dry. I know where it goes. I do all the math in my head. And that is how we did it. And that is how we performed. And that, was, believe it or not, was one of the most challenging things in my years of teaching others who are blind. Because there's not a technique, quote unquote, the blind technique to work in cash register. It is how you do it with the people. It is how you work with them. It's hard to imagine honesty is still there, but it is. Honesty, along with how you handle yourself and how you interact with that person, keeps things running smooth. Yes, I did all the math in my head. It was, you know, when they were ordering 15 things and add the tax to it, it was quite interesting. But you did it. You made it happen.
You're amazing. Yeah, that really struck me.